Let's now bring in Marwan Bishara, Al Jazeera senior political analyst. He joins us today from Doha. Marwan, another visit from Blinken. Now, given what we're seeing there in Rafah and the hopes that we're hearing about there from Tariq of the people on the ground, do you think that Blinken's visit might take any kind of a different tone from the last few?
You know, one would hope so, Nastasia, especially that his last few trips were incredibly counterproductive. In fact, they've led to more violence and more casualties among the Palestinians. At the end of November, he assured us that he got the commitment from Prime Minister Netanyahu that Israel will protect civilians. Since then, 6,000 additional children were killed by Israel, double that number among the civilians of Gaza. So clearly, neither Secretary Blinken's effort nor Prime Minister Netanyahu's assurances to the Secretary of State have been helpful. You would hope that this time around things are different. Now, judging from his press conference this evening, one cannot be that hopeful because it sounds that his holier-than-thou approach, as if America, has been the humanitarian in chief, is just not just deceiving. It's mind-boggling. It's insulting to our intelligence. I mean, the United States has been a participant. It has been a participant in the war cabinet meeting in the Israeli government. It's American arms, American money, and American diplomacy that allowed this plausible genocide to go forward the past 4 months. So for the Secretary of State to continue to be Israel's advocate, Israel's foreign minister, and at the same time wants to play mediator, an honest broker, I think there's a contradiction in term here. So I think once he goes to Israel tomorrow, he needs to start behaving not like Israel's advocate, but more like a mediator of a superpower type, where America should use its leverage with Israel if America is serious about ending the war and freeing the captives as well, of course, as the prisoners.
You mentioned leverage there, Marwan. Now, in that press conference, Blinken was confronted with the idea that Israel's defiance of U.S. requests that we've seen is making Washington look weak. But it was interesting to see Blinken took credit for getting humanitarian aid into Gaza, saying that that shows that Israel is listening to the White House. What did you make of that?
Now, that's the part that's probably, as an analyst, would make me roll my eyes, not once, not twice, but countless times, just listening to a diplomat saying that, or taking credit for the humanitarian aid, which is basically a few trucks of food before people were killed again in Gaza, while America was a participant in the war. I mean, it's just kind of incredulous for the Secretary of State to be taking credit for the humanitarian assistance to a people his country is helping kill and destroy and displace within the Gaza Strip. I mean, that part was a bit too harsh to accept from any diplomat, let alone from an American diplomat. But once again, one would hope that, Secretary Blinken would start shedding that kind of, Israel advocate stance, that holier-than-thou approach, and start taking a more credible, more responsible, more grown-up approach to this issue that is turning to a full-fledged genocide, perhaps bordering on extermination, if the Israelis continue with their onslaught beyond Rafah into Khan Yunis, where some 2 million people now are concentrated, basically helpless, basically homeless in the southern part of Gaza.
Marwan, as all of this continues, I've been wondering how the U.S. and Antony Blinken is now being regarded by other regional powers. We listened to Blinken constantly emphasize how the U.S. wants to de-escalate tensions, right? But how are, for instance, the U.S. strikes that have been taking place in the region, how are those being read, especially by all the regional powers?
Look, despite the American diplomats' attempts at saying that this has nothing to do with what's going on in Gaza, unfortunately for him, it has everything to do with what's going on in Gaza. I mean, clearly those groups, whether you agree them or disagree them, whether you want to denounce them or praise them, they certainly have reacted after the genocide started to unravel in plain sight in Gaza. It is a situation that is getting out of hand, slowly but surely. America now is engaged in war on different fronts. It's bombing in Yemen, it's bombing in Syria, in Iraq. It could be bombing next, I don't know, God knows where, in Lebanon and beyond. So despite attempts, or despite keeping up the appearances of wanting to wind down the war and limit its spread in the region, America is now engaged on behalf of Israel in a war across the region. Now, this is not to the liking of America's allies, who have basically invited the United States to come in and to be responsible, as a broker, as a mediator, as a protector for some of those states, for fear of, I don't know, their neighbors or whoever. But the United States, especially over the last 4 months, have acted so irresponsibly that it's putting in danger even its allies, because public opinion is boiling. Radical groups are becoming more and more popular because of America's support to Israel's genocide in Gaza. So once again, we have to go back to square one. It's time to end the war. This war has run its course. America understands that. It's time to do it now. This is perhaps the last chance to save the captives in Gaza, because if the war goes on now to Khan Yunis and to Rafah, God knows what will happen to those captives. It is a last chance also to save the Palestinians from another, perhaps an extermination or displacement in the south of Gaza. It's time for the United States also to do so, because once again, as I said, it is widening the war, and it's going to get implicated into another forever war in the region, something Biden has said once and again that he wants to avoid. So all the signs, all the signals, all the roads lead to a truce, a ceasefire, a permanent one, where there'll be rebuilding of Gaza, exchange of captives and prisoners, and hopefully, quickly, the withdrawal of Israeli forces from occupied territories and establishment of some sort of an independent, contiguous, sovereign Palestinian state. Otherwise, we're going to be once again in the cycle of violence that's going to implicate everyone, including the United States.
Well, we'll see what emerges from that meeting tomorrow. Marwan Bishara, Al Jazeera senior political analyst. Always great to get your thoughts, Marwan. Thanks for joining us again.